Hello and welcome to this course on an introduction to STCW. So by the end of this session, you will be able to describe the history and development of the STCW Convention of Code, as well as summarise the basic structure and contents of the convention. You'll be able to explain the skills required to operate a ship and how they've been identified as a competence that's been grouped together as functions. Explain how competencies are specified by the tables, and how the competencies are divided into specific tasks and skills. You'll be able to explain how the competence tables in the STCW Code specify the criteria for the knowledge, understanding and proficiency, and the methods for demonstrating competence and the criteria for you as an instructor for evaluating competence. You'll also be able to explain the role of in-service training, simulators training, and on-board training, as well as stating that those responsible for training and assessment and how they should be appropriately qualified. So first thing we're going to talk about is the International Maritime Organization, or IMO for short. So the International Maritime Organization is an agency of the United Nations. So what do you think they are responsible for? Quickly jot it down on a piece of paper. So they are responsible for the safety of shipping, the security of shipping, and the prevention of marine and atmospheric pollution by ships. Now, the reason it has been changed to just the prevention of marine pollution to prevention of marine and atmospheric pollution is because the MARPOL Convention changed to include another annex on atmospheric pollution. Now, the IMO was actually established to adopt the legislation. So they are the ones that do the legislation, build the framework, and it's up to the governments or governments responsible that adopt the conventions to then filter that down through their governments and onto the ships that fly their flag to ensure they're actually implemented and the ships are compliant. So I would like you to now complete an exercise. So you will go to your workbook, and you will find the exercise entitled Exercise What is STCW? And I would like you to research what is STCW and what exactly does it mean for you as a trainer. Now, you should open your copy of STCW and complete this exercise. Please pause this video now, complete the exercise and press play when you're ready. So what exactly is STCW? So it means the Standards of Training, Certification and Watchkeeping. It is an IMO Convention and Code. So it was brought into force on the 28th of April in 1984. Now, a number of different amendments have been made to that convention and code, with the most recently being what's called the Manila Amendments. Now, the main purpose of the convention is to promote safety of life at sea, so it links directly in with SOLAS and the protection of the marine environment, so that's MARPOL. So what this actually is a framework to establish a common agreement for standards of training, so training of all officers, ratings, and anyone certified under STCW, and also watchkeeping officers and crew members. So it's one level of training that everyone internationally should adhere to, and it's a minimum standard. Okay, so the Manila Amendments came in, and they started looking at some of the courses, so the short courses that seafarers do, and they were saying that basically they feel that seafarers need to update these opposed to them sitting them once and deciding that that's them competent for the rest of their career. They need to go through refresher training, which is very similar to what the aviation industry does. So the STCW Code, all merchant ships should carry a copy of STCW, and all training centres, because this is where our training comes from. So when we start looking at model courses, the model courses will be built on STCW. So if you're not sure about what a model course is getting at, you can then look back at STCW and from there decide what exactly you need to put in your training as a minimum. So what exactly does it mean for you as a trainer? So the first thing is it's going to give you a minimum competence for your students. So if you were, for example, training a cadet, you'd be able to look and see what an officer of the watch training was. So you go through and you'd be able to see the minimum of competence for an officer of the watch. And then from that, you would know exactly how you need to train your cadets, what they will have, their prerequisites. So that means the training they have before they get to you, and what they need to cover with you. So training wise, whether you're a short course or you are a long course, so a short course being something like a firefighting training course, or a long course which will mean you are training something like as cadets to officers, or second engineer to chief engineer, it will help you decide exactly what your training needs to contain, and it also helps you assess your own training to see if you have any gaps in it. And the STCWs, as I've already described, will help you provide a framework. So you will go from having a model course, which is very, very specific to your course, but you can trace it all the way back to STCW. So for example, if you were doing a training course on marine pollution, you would have your model course on marine pollution, and you would have all your learning outcomes and your learning objectives. But you can directly trace this back, because if you went into STCW, you would be able to see what, for example, cadet needs to know to become an officer of the watch for marine pollution, and this would ensure that you gave that cadet the correct training in line with STCW. So you're now going to complete another exercise, so familiarising yourself with STCW. So I want you to look through STCW, and I want you to tell me, how is STCW laid out? What exactly is contained within STCW? And what the difference between Part A and Part B is. So again, go to your workbook, find the exercise called Familiarising Yourself with STCW, and please pause this video, complete the exercise, and then press play when you're ready. So STCW. So what the contents are. So the content, it contains 3 different sections. You've got the articles. These outline the legal responsibilities that a party has to meet. A party means a government that is signed up to the STCW Convention and Code. You've then got the annex. So the annex is what we as trainers are specifically interested in, because it gives the technical details on how the legal responsibilities referred to in the articles should be met. So for example, if the articles stated that, for example, a second engineer to step up to chief engineer needs to have specific training on management techniques, the annex would then give you the technical details or the lowdown on exactly how this needs to be met. So the annex would contain, second engineer to chief engineer needs to go on a 7-day course on management, and this is how it needs to be conducted. And the last one is the STCW Code. This specifies in more depth the technical details which are contained in the annex. Now it contains both a Part A and a Part B. Now Part A is mandatory, you need to do it. So as trainers, what we're specifically interested in is points 2 and 3, the annexes and the code itself. So the STCW Convention is parts 1 and 2, the articles and the annex, and the code is part 3, which is that specific, more in-depth technical details. So what is the difference between parts A and B? So part A is your mandatory standards of training, certification and watchkeeping. This is the minimum what type of officer. So for example, if you were looking at a chief officer, it would give you the mandatory standards or the minimum standards that they must meet of training, certification and watchkeeping. So it might say to become a chief mate, you need to have a minimum of 12 months sea time, and it's got to be in a watchkeeping capacity, plus you'll have to do a certain number of courses. And Part B is recommended guidelines. Now this is not legally binding. If you have a flag or report stake, come on board to check your vessels. They are only checking your compliance with Part A of the standards and not Part B. So the different chapters of STCW, so there is the first one, which is the general provisions. 2 is the master and the deck department, so this goes from the master right down to an AB. You've then got the engine department, which is the chief engineer, right down to the engine ratings. You have radio communication and radio operators. So if your country does have specific radio communication and radio officers, this is where they will be contained. If it's been contained within the deck department, they will have to do parts 2 and 4. You'll then have the special training for the requirements of personnel on certain types of ships. This be tankers, gas, chemical, and petrochem. And you will also have passenger ship and ro-ro ferries. You will then have your emergency, occupational safety, security, medical care, and survival functions. So this is where you start seeing your short courses. So number 5 and number 6, this is where your short courses come in. So if you are a short course instructor, you will be specifically interested in those 2 different chapters. And then you will have your Chapter 7, which is your alternative certification. So not everybody comes through a standard route. It might be, for example, they are a yachtsman and they've got maybe, for example, they're offshore yacht masters. And they will then be able to upgrade their certificate to an unlimited by taking another pathway. So these different pathways are in the alternative certification. And our last one is our watchkeeping standards. So in STCW, there is also stuff on hours of work and rest for watchkeepers, and as well as in the MLC, and this is it when we would find it in the watchkeeping section. So this is what the tables look like. So you have 3 different columns. You have a competence column, a knowledge, understanding, and proficiency, your methods for demonstrating competence, and your criteria for evaluating competence. So the first thing we would go to look, so when I was talking about the marine environment, prevention of pollution, so a competence gives us the take precautions to prevent pollution of the marine environment, but this doesn't tell us exactly how we need to train it. So this is the column as a trainer we would start to be looking at. So we'd be wanting to look at the basic knowledge of impact of shipping on the marine environment and the effect of operational or accidental pollution on it. So we've already got an idea of what we need to start training in. So it's a basic knowledge, and they just need to know about the impact of an accidental or operational spill or incident. They need to know basic environmental protection procedures, and they have to have a basic knowledge or complexity of the diversity of the marine environment. So looking on to column 3, this is how you as a trainer are actually going to check they are competent. So it would be an assessment of evidence obtained from approved instruction or attendance at an approved training course. So for STCW, to show that you have actually got that competence, you would need to go on a course that is approved by the administration. And again, criteria for evaluating competence is you'd look at your organisational procedures which are designed to safeguard the marine environment are observed at all times. So if I was going on board a ship, that column 4 was what I'd be looking at if I was doing a port state or flag state inspection. So thinking about the Manila Amendments, which I discussed with you at the updating training. So what this means for us as trainers is as of the 1st of January 2017, all seafarers, doesn't matter whether they are from Spain, whether they are from, say, Nigeria or the United Kingdom, all seafarers must have documentary evidence of either completing a training course with an approved training provider or updated their training within the last 5 years for the following courses. So personal survival techniques, fire prevention and firefighting, proficiency in survival craft and rescue boats other than fast rescue boats, proficiency in fast rescue boats, and advanced firefighting. So if you are an officer that's, for example, required to do fire prevention and firefighting and advanced firefighting, you are required to do both those courses. So for example, if you sat for advanced firefighting but didn't do fire prevention and firefighting, you are not in compliance with the STCW. So you're now going to complete another exercise. Please go to your workbook and find the exercise Know Your Terms. So I'd like you to write down what you think each of these terms mean. So I don't want you to go and research it. I just want you to think what you think they mean as per STCW. So the terms are administration, approved, function, party, certificate of proficiency, and certificate of competence. Okay, so administration. This means the government of the party whose flag a ship is entitled to fly. So that's basically any ship that whichever flag is flying on the back, this is the flag state of the country. So they, as an administration, deal with regulating the training, certification and education of all seafarers that sail on their vessels and making sure they're compliant with the STCW Convention and Code. So approved means that a national maritime administration has approved a training program or seagoing service because it meets the requirement of the amended STCW Convention. Okay, a function. This is a way of classifying shipboard tasks by functions and levels of responsibility. There's actually 7 different function areas and 3 different levels of responsibility. So the level of responsibility is your support level. So your support is very much your able seaman, your engine ratings, etc. Operational, this is the officer of the watch level. So this would be your engine officer of the watch or your deck officer of the watch. And then you've got your management level. So your management level being your chief officers, your second engineers, your masters, and your chief engineers. So our functions are listed down here. So this is for the deck department. So you've got navigation, cargo handling and stowage, controlling the operation of a ship and care for the persons on board, marine engineering, maintenance and repair, electrical, electronics and control engineering, and radio communications. So these 7 different functions, if you've got a certificate of competency, you will find that you will have each of the functions related to if you were deck, engine or electrical, and it will be either at the management, operational or support level. So you could have, for example, navigation at the management level, cargo handling and stowage at the management level, but for example, radio communications at the operational level. So party, this is where a country has signed up to the STCW Convention and this has entered into force. Now, if you have signed up to the STCW Convention, you are under legal obligation to implement the standards contained within the convention. So that's your Part A. You'd be going in and you would be making sure that your vessels are in compliance with these standards. So certificate of proficiency, this is a certificate that's other than a certificate of competency that's issued to a seafarer. Now, this is very much usually given when you go to training centres for short courses, for example, those PST, firefighting, etc. You will get a certificate of proficiency and it will state that you've met the relevant requirements of training and competencies, or you've done the seagoing service that's required under the convention. So an example of a certificate of proficiency is shown on the right-hand side of the screen. So our certificate of competency, this isn't to be confused with a certificate of proficiency. This is a certificate that's issued and endorsed by the administration, so that's the flag state, for masters, officers and GMDSS radio operators, and it's in accordance with the provisions of Chapters 2, 3, 5 and 7, and entitles the actual holder of that certificate to perform the functions which are listed at the responsibility level. So remember when we looked at the functions table, that is what your certificate of competency is showing. So I'd like you to now look and to complete the exercise, the role of different forms of training. So I'd like you to consider the role of the 3 different forms of training of onboard, so actually being on board, and shadowing, in service as in you've taken over and you're learning on the job, and simulator training. So I'd like you to go to your workbook, look at those 3 different forms of training and what you think the role of these 3 different forms of training. Please pause this video and press play when you are ready to continue. Okay, so I will be assessing that last task in your final, when I do your final assessment of looking over your workbook. So the next thing we need to look at is qualified staff. So anyone that takes a short course must be qualified. So what you will find if you were looking, say, for example, on an IMO model course, or if you're looking at your flag states guidelines for courses, there will be a staff requirement. Now, the extract shown below is one from the IMO model course for training for marine instructors, so the course you're currently sitting. So it says the course should normally be conducted by experienced instructors with background knowledge of the shipping industry. So this means that you couldn't, for example, employ a maths teacher to come and train this course. They need to understand the shipping industry. And that person also needs experience of marine education and training. So quite often we are looking for someone that has taught in the maritime industry to teach this course and pass on their knowledge. It's also recommended that at least one member of staff has undergone pedagogic training. So that means that they have gone to degree level and done degree level training. So I've gone and done my postgrad in training and education in higher education. So that allows me to take over for this course, the lead in the qualified staff. So that's us at the end of the session. You should now be able to look at all the following. If you're unsure of any of the following bullet points, then please go back, watch the video, and also look at the explanations that are detailed in your workbook. Thank you very much for listening.